There have been different reactions to the presidential media chat, especially on the economy, the size of the president's cabinet, the price of petrol, as well as inflation. Let's bring in Professor Uche Uwaleke, who is director of the Institute of Capital Market Studies at the Nasarawa State University, Keffi. Also here with us is Dr. Akinsiju, the chairman of the policy think tank, Independent Media and Policy Initiative. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on Newsnight tonight.
Thanks for having me. Thanks so much.
Great. I guess it's not too early to say Merry Christmas.
Yeah, it's Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. It's Christmas Eve. Yes, but you know, this Christmas Eve is coming with a lot of controversies following President Tinubu's inaugural media chat. And there have been various reactions. The PDP has just reacted, saying they're fabricated statistics, the president is insensitive. Dr. Uwaleke, did you watch the media chat? What did you think about it?
Oh, yes, I did. And I also think that in many respects, I think the president was right in the assumptions that he made. Mm-hmm. Now, if you look at it from several aspects, what you would come to conclude is that yes, we are beginning to see signs of economic recovery. Take GDP growth rate, for example. We saw the GDP number in Q3 of this year, and what we witnessed was the highest we have had since this year, over 3%. Now, if you also look at the even the issue with the reserves, external reserves to have grown to a point where we hear we have is sufficient now to finance over 9 months of imports and over 17 months of goods. Okay, so at over 40 billion dollars. You also look at even the inflows, foreign portfolio investments in particular, remittances too, of course on account of what the central bank have put in place. And then more importantly, which he also alluded to, is the fact that there is this departure from what used to be again talking in terms of the relationship between monetary and fiscal, the ways and means, the culture of ways and means, simply printing money to finance deficit. So I would say yes, to an extent that's an improvement. And even in the energy sector, it would also appear that competition, in quotes, is beginning to also drive down, although marginally, the pump price of fuel. So now, if you look at some of these indices, what you would tend to conclude is that maybe in the near future, first quarter, second quarter, some of these things will begin to materialize. So I think to a large extent, yes, we are beginning to see some improvements, although the direct impact on the people, is something that we are yet to see. And we have to see that because of the fact that the growth we have witnessed, which is also where I want the president to pay more attention to. Although you also mentioned that there are steps to boost agriculture.
Yeah.
We'll
come to the specifics. Yeah. Let me bring in Dr. Akinsiju to this conversation. 18 months, the president, he appreciated the patience of Nigerians, but he says there's no going back. He's been consistent about his economic policies that have caused, this myriad of challenges. But, do you think that's enough time for Nigerians to begin to demand tangible results as to what the president was saying on Monday, to say, you've been in power for 18 months, you wanted this job, you have it, give us tangible results? Or do you think Nigerians are in a rush?
Well, what we are going through is actually an attempt to a paradigm shift in the economic model. So we have sustained a model of more than 60 years. A mix, we call it a mixed economy, a mix of control, a mix of open market and all that. Sometimes it's even difficult to understand what exact economic template we are running. Now you have a president in place who yesterday declared that is an open market advocate champion, and he does not believe in price control. So what that means is that he is an advocate of a supply and to make it basic, it's supply and demand based market economy. We have not had that kind of economy in a long time. And to do that, you must go through a shock period, a shock process, because we are coming from that laissez-faire attitude where people use influence, where people use connections, more or less, to get things done. It's not about the market determining the form of life we want to live. It's about nexus. So to a large extent, I think these policies, the important thing for me is that the policies are deliberately conceptualized, deliberately deployed. And well, there may be some consequences that may not have been foreseen. But again, this is expected that when you are changing the paradigm, it would have some forms of challenges associated with it.
So let's come to the specifics, Professor Uwaleke, because, I mean, once upon a time, we had inflation in this country at single digits, and it seems so far a time. We were promised some 21% by the end of this year, but that didn't happen.
Yes.
We are at 34.6%.
Yes.
Now the president is saying by 2025 next year, we're going to see 15%.
Yes.
When you see these unintended consequences of the president's policies, do you think that's feasible? I mean, those are the questions Nigerians are asking to say, is the president really matching actions with words? Are we seeing that with the economic policies? Let me let you start that.
Yeah. Well, there's no denying the fact that when you remove fuel subsidy, of course, with attendant increase in pump price of fuel, and at the same time you unify exchange rates, again, that also had the effect of, if you like, devaluing the naira. Okay, so those two combined to put a lot of pressure on prices, on price levels, generally. So it was expected that those actions will result in higher inflation. The IMF, the World Bank, they all predicted that, such that today we're having inflation running at, just as you mentioned, elevated at as high as 34%. Now, on whether the projections for 2025 is realistic at 15%, I honestly think 15% appears ambitious. Ambitious in the sense that if you look at the even the trend of inflation, it will be difficult, so to say, to achieve in 15%. But that's not to say we are not going to see moderation in inflation rates. We are going to see moderation in inflation rates on account of some of the measures the government says they will put in place, particularly in the area of agriculture. I want to emphasize agriculture, and he made that point yesterday in his, the fact that, there is the plan to mechanize agriculture.
With tractors on the way, some 2,500
exactly.
tractors.
And then also, helping farmers to access credits, a single-digit, interest rate. So that will go a long way to boost output. He emphasized the point that, which I agree, that the inflation, inflationary pressure is more with the food output, and that if you can boost food output, you bring down inflation. And the MBS data is very clear on that, because if you look at the 12 divisions of classifications that MBS releases, 3 of them, food, housing, and transport, constitute 76% of the pressure. So if you can deal with food, which accounts for more than 50% of that, okay, you make it very easy for the central bank to do that. So my point is, my answer is, yes, we are going to see moderation in inflation rates, but we may not, 50% will be a tall order.
Professor Uwaleke, I heard so many if in what you said. There's a lot of ifs. If we're able to do that.
Oh, yes.
So Dr. Akinsiju, if, are we able to do that, the ifs in it? I mean, inflation, is it possible? I mean, is it realistic?
The if actually translates to all things being equal.
So, is that possible? Because there are those who argue that we have so much coming from the monetary aspect. We've seen the CBN, the tightening and all of that, jacking up interest rates. It doesn't seem to have worked in the year 2024. And so going into 2025, when you hear the president speak with so much confidence to say it is achievable, you wonder, does he have a magic wand? How's he going to do it?
Well, for every policy, there's a calibration template, a modeling. I want to assume that the president and his team had gone through the modeling of that of the policy. But first, let's even commend him for targeting that kind of figure going forward. Because if you're at 34.6, as it were, and you target a 15% over a 12-month period, the average is to say that you should be reducing inflation rates by close to 3% every month. That's huge by itself.
Yeah.
But I think that he's motivated. That's the important thing. And when you are motivated, it means that you'll be coming up with policies that may properly align with your vision. So he's talked about agriculture, for instance. If it is possible, he said the Brazilians, the 2.5 billion investors, $2.5 billion investors from Brazil are in town.
Yes, you did mention.
That's in a long while, we've always heard about promissory notes, investment promissory notes.
Yeah.
When the leadership of the country goes out and all that, this commitment has been made. But we are now, this announcement shows that there's flesh, to the promissory note. I think a 2.5 billion naira investment in that sector, with a change of processes, mechanization and all that. And of course, the president said clearly that he will not be going back to the practice of our forefathers, subsistence farming, so to mechanized farming. And I also know by practice that the cycle of production in the agricultural sector is less than 6 months. So if you actually have a committed plan, a clear plan on what you want to do within 6 months, you can start seeing the fruits of whatever those policies could be can be in the market. So and again, he also talked about increasing production from the pharmaceutical sector. That's one area that had become bothersome, because if you are talking about the quality of living with high prices associated with pharmaceutical products, it also impacts the standard of living, the living form of individuals. So if prices, if we can have production boosted, and prices drop, it will also reflect eventually on the inflation rate. I don't know how it's possible to crystallize the policy of electric vehicle, as you said, within 12 months, because that's a huge capital project. Even to have to establish an assembly should take more than 12 months. Yeah. But if we properly review and align, we may not get to that 15%, but there will be, like Prof said, I can see moderation. Okay. Even if we can do 2021, between 21 and 24, it would have impacted the quality of life, the cost of living in the country.
Indeed. Okay, so Prof, there are some who argue that we need to see a lot more prudence when it comes to the fiscal authority to match what the monetary authorities are doing, and that at the moment we're not seeing enough of that. And when the president is talking about bringing down inflation, he cannot escape that. He cannot but fix, prudence in government. But we heard the president say, for instance, he limited it to the size of his cabinet to say, Nigeria is a big country. We need a lot of hands on board. Can you match that to see how we're able to match the other side of the monetary policy in trying to bring down this inflation when the government is spending large, is spending big? Because someone said, for example, the money in the money in circulation we're talking about is not in the pockets of the average Nigerians. Absolutely. It is in the pocket of a few. Absolutely. So are you able to appreciate that argument?
Yes, that's also in line with what I've always argued, that inflationary pressure in the country is largely, in my view, non-monetary in terms of the factors that are driving inflation. Yes, it is true that over the years, especially since 2014 or so, average GDP growth rate, for example, has been around 1.8%. Recall we had recession in 2020. We also had in 2016. So if you take it on the average, what you get is around 1.8. That's below 2%. But over the same time period, we've had money supply grow by as much as 13%. So when you have that kind of mismatch, of course, you should expect that that will also exert pressure on prices, and that will fuel inflation. So there is the monetary side, no doubt, and that's what the central bank has been struggling to contain. But there is also largely the fiscals, and I'm happy that it has been recognized in the sense that he talked about it. He talked about the issue of output, and he also talked about the fact that what they are currently doing now in the area of security, tackling insecurity, will also help, because it's a major factor. Stopping farmers from going to farms, will also help to boost food output. But I also mentioned it's not just food. There's also the issue of transport, very important, because when you produce and you can't convey them to the markets, again, that's an issue. Part of why yams are expensive today, you find yams are produced even today. Yams, even amidst insecurity, we understand, large tons are produced in Benue State, but the problem is that
getting them to the market.
Getting them to the market. So transport. So the issue of transport, is there. Now, to the question you asked, of course, that also rubs off, tangentially on the issue of deficits. Okay, if you also look at the 2025 proposed budget, you find that deficit is also growing. 13 trillion is what we have, what we are projecting. So, and I think by going through that proposal, that 2025 proposal myself, I've tried to do go through, and I think that we can really, free up some funds, through by trying to also minimize waste. Let me put it that way. So it is possible for the fiscal side to minimize waste. But let me also say this pointedly. I am very much in support of most of the things he said. Okay, and if I'm to score him, I think I will score him above average. It's a good thing he has started it, and I want it to be sustained. But what I disagree with is the idea that the size of the cabinet, is okay. So I think that trimming that cabinet, will go a long way to reducing the cost of governance. And I want to give an example. You say the 2025 budget proposal, that I've gone through, I've tried to, if you look at the executive proposal, the one on the website of the budget office,
yes,
you'll find that executive proposal is 2,421 pages. Okay, if you count the number of agencies listed there, you count 1,308 agencies. Out of the 1,308 agencies, 288 of them, which I counted, if you drop it on Excel and you use Control-Find, it will take you to all the agencies that have said they will buy motor vehicles. Okay, now 288 will buy motor vehicles, and if you add up the total cost of the motor vehicles they've said they will buy, 2025, it gives you 113 billion naira. And I was asking myself, imagine if we could say, okay, since we are cutting costs, since we are sacrificing, why don't we, these motor vehicles are meant for executives of those agencies. Yes. So why don't we say, okay, for the 2025, let them make sacrifice. Let them not buy.
And we buy these vehicles every year.
Abroad. And they're going to be imported. You can see the pressure on Forex. So the more ministries you have, okay, the more likely you get these kinds of items in the budget. So that's why I think, okay, that is possible. It's possible to also run the government efficiently, because he kept mentioning efficiency and effectiveness. Yes. It's also possible to achieve what's the efficiency? Input, output, right? Yes. So it's possible to achieve efficiency
with a smaller number.
Exactly.
Dr. Akinsiju, do you agree with the president when he says, the size of my cabinet, I'm not ready to bring it down. It's just fine by me. But Nigerians are saying that's a large number. I mean, it's the largest we've had in history. And he says they're effective, they're efficient. But here we are talking about cost of governance, and Professor Uwaleke has gone through the 2025 budget and breaking it down for us. The amount of money for just vehicles, and there'll be other items.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, well, I will come from the point of view of the chief executive mindset. It's the chief executive that has all possible information before him and determine how he wants to go forward. We have seen the shaking of rejiggling of the cabinet once already. I think about 4 or 5 were
6
relieved.
were dismissed. Yes.
Were relieved.
I relieved, dismissed, sacked, let's go.
So of course, which means that he has a consciousness of the kind of cabinet he wants, and of course the kind of deliverables he desires from them. So to a large extent, his excuse for me is understandable, because it was talking about the large population of Nigeria. The constitution, our constitution itself, has a benchmark for how many numbers of ministers you should have. And of course, there's also for the exigencies. Now, the president thought that because of the large numbers, and I had always believed too, that the Nigerian political scene is about differentiation in interest and outlook. And there may be a need to actually address these multiplications of interest and outlooks. So beyond even the 36 plus 1 that the Constitution had provided for. Yeah. Now, we have so many agencies, as Prof noted, and that had been my concern. We've also had the Orosanye report that had been on the table of three chief executives now. And
someone says it's a ghost and it resurrects every 4 years.
And I think this president once made a commitment to effecting it.
February of this year.
Yes. I want to believe that going forward, there should be that realization that there is a need to streamline. Okay. When we get to that point, but he's the chief executive. That's the impression I got from the media chat yesterday, is that this president is a hands-on executive, and that is important in managing any sphere of human interest. So he's a hands-on chief executive. He understands what is going on within his space, and he determines how he wants to manage it. So to that extent, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Great. As we wrap up this chat, was there anything missing for you from that media chat? What would you have loved the president to address yesterday that he didn't address? Was there anything missing?
No.
Nothing.
At least for a starter, he virtually crossed all the genres of concerns. Security, corruption, finance, inflation. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I did.
Well, and for you, you said you scored above average.
Yes,
so what was missing?
It was just 1 hour. Within 1 hour, of course, he dealt with a whole lot of issues, including. He touched on the very important tax reforms. Okay, and which I think is is very good and important. He did because for me, my personal view about the tax reforms is that they are, if we implement them, they will go a long way, to support economic growth. Because those tax reforms, really, if we go through those tax bills, they are actually pro-poor. Okay, just as he said, they're pro-poor, and they are not, the whole idea is not to tax poverty, all right, to shift the burden from the poor people to the wealthy.
Gentlemen, unfortunately, time is not your friend when you're having a chat like this. But thank you so much. I have to thank you, Dr. Akinsiju, the chairman of the policy think tank, Independent Media and Policy Initiative, as well as Professor Uche Uwaleke, Director of the Institute of Capital Market Studies at the Nasarawa State University. Thank you both.
Thanks so much.
And have a lovely Christmas.